Dr. Jeff Lieberman, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Renee.
Thanks for joining me on the Corporate Athletes Podcast. It's great to see you again. Last fall, we had an awesome leadership conversation, and today is a follow-up to that with really a focus on execution. You know, how leaders in sports, in business, and in life can put into practice, some of the things that you've shared around leadership and producing exceptional results. So let's get started. You've said mental health is a civil rights issue of our time. If I'm a CEO listening right now, what are 2 to 3 concrete actions I should take inside my organization?
Well, I'm really glad that you led off with that question because it shows when you were listening when we spoke before, and also that you considered it interesting enough to ask a follow-up to. Well, what it really refers to is that everybody's interested in health. I mean, if you don't have your health, then really everything else is secondary. And too often we only get checkups from the neck up. We don't consider, the brain and the behavioral side of the brain. And so what it refers to is the fact that when you are sick with something, whether it's COVID, whether it's hypertension, whether it's diabetes, you can go to doctors and hospitals and clinics, and you can reasonably expect to get a standard of care that is based on the extent of the scientific knowledge we have about that condition and the treatments that are available for it. It's not the case with mental health. And the population frequency of mental disorders, not the worried well, but people who have anxiety, depression, possible susceptibility to psychosis, obsessive compulsive disorder, susceptibility to substance abuse, is between 15 and 20% of the population. So it behooves any institution, particularly educational institutions and universities especially, because that's kind of the age when you're in the sweet spot for the onset, to be able to be attuned to this. But beyond that, there's just general issues. One doesn't want to be just, not sick. You want to be optimally healthy. And that has to do with what psychological abilities does a person have to deal with adversity, to become resilient, to know how to respond and seek out the things that they view in life as the goals into success and what they want to achieve personally and professionally. So if you're the leader of any entity, whether it's a corporation or a university department or an athletic team, you want to be concerned about the person's well-being and susceptibility to mental distress or mental illness. And it's being able to have an ability to sense what the person's state of mind is and to take their emotional temperature and then not feel constrained to wade in a politically discreet and tactful way, and to try and help them and show them that you're attuned to their feelings. There's something called theory of mind. It was developed by a neuropsychologist in Britain, and it's what humans have that no other mammalian species have, which is you can project yourself into the person that you're talking to or relating to and have a sense of where they're at. This is absent in autism. This is one of the deficits that people with autism have, but you can do this. So essentially leaders, it behooves them to be able to take the temperature, the emotional temperature, as I was saying, to understand where people are at and to understand when they're in distress, when they're not feeling happy, when they're not feeling well, and to enable them to show your interest by trying to find out and then enabling them to overcome that. And this isn't done on a population basis, which is why it makes it a population-wide civil rights issue.
That's great. So a leader should, number one, take the emotional temperature of their team members and be equipped to do that, and then look for the right opportunities to wade in to provide the assistance. Is that what you're saying, essentially?
Yes, but you have to scale it to the size of the organization you're the leader of. So if you're a leader of a large entity, with tens or hundreds of people in it. You can't do that with everybody, so you have your direct reports. So your direct reports are the ones that you have to be most focused on. But then on the other hand, you need to set a corporate culture which enables your compassion to be reflected in that culture to other people, so that even though you have no direct interaction with all of the people, they understand what you're about by what you're trying to establish within the organization. And this is done through corporate values, through the example you set, and through your direct reports reflecting you, reflecting what your interests are and values are, and what you've sort of tried to groom them to be able to do in the way of leadership. And too many times within companies and organizations, fear is what's used. In other words, if you screw up, your ass is on the line, and you better do it or else. And that's not a motivating factor. It is up to an extent, but in the end, it's not a winning proposition. And the best example is in the military. In the military, there's a sense of trying to have your colleagues back and to create an environment. And Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, talks about this. Peter Drucker and Effective Executive, John Wooden certainly encouraged this, which is that you want to create a culture in which people feel empowered to strive, even if it means taking some risks, and that if they do so in a well-intended and reasoned way and it doesn't work out, they're not going to be thrown out just based on a mistake, but they're going to be supported. So a culture of safety is what ultimately gets people the best out of them. On the other hand, people have to be reflecting what's expected of them in terms of hard work, discipline, and commitment to the corporate or the organizational values and shared goals. They can't be, out for themselves. They can't be self-interested. They can't be trying to have it both ways. And that reflects not just what you do when they're on your team, but reflects how you recruit people. Meaning, when you recruit people, you look for not just their ability, their track record, how successful they've been, what their educational background is, what their winning, their ranking was as a junior, but it's what kind of person they are. And that's not easy to do all the time with a single or just a couple of interviews or interactions. You have to really try and figure it out. Looking at the family is helpful in the case of looking at recruits for college athletics. So paying attention to this, and I just did a shrink. I have a series called Shrink Speak Shorts, which are little brief kind of Instagram length comments. And I was talking about the Winter Olympics and talking about the difference between the quad god, who everybody thought was a slam dunk and who fell and came in eighth place, and then the woman who won the downhill and then the figure skating, and the difference in their mental status, and how that really made the difference. And the takeaway message was pay attention to the inner game, not just the outer game. So any leader of any organization that is able to be big enough and enlightened enough to understand that and to make the effort to do it, as opposed to what's your bottom line, what's your profit and loss, what's your winning and loss record, how many customers have you brought in, but to look at how do you empower the individual by being attuned. I mean, physical health, you'll know. Mental health, you won't always know. People don't say, I don't care what they're doing. You just show up and you get your job done. Well, that's not the best way to do it. Then you get presenteeism and absenteeism problems that you really is undermining their performance, and it's hidden from the leader.
Jeff, you remind me, or your comments brought to mind a great quote from Dean Smith, the North Carolina basketball coach, who said, if you live or die with every loss, you'll be dead a lot. So I think, as leaders, we need to keep perspective, keep things, keep our priorities in order, which is not always easy, obviously. Uh, Jeff, how should leaders balance mental toughness with psychological awareness without lowering performance standards?
Oh, I think they go hand in hand. But I see what you're getting at. You know, if you say if you're too attuned to the psychological and you spend time trying to be touchy feely and sensitive to people's that instead of like suck it up and get the job done, you know, it cuts both ways. Um, I think that well, first it has to do with trying to reach the kid. You need to be able to have some awareness, some ability to understand what makes individuals tick, and even if you're not exactly right, show them that you're interested. Okay, but at the same time, you're going to be demanding. You know, you have expectations, and the expectations and the toughness that you're demanding is for their own good as much as it is for the team's good. Ultimately, leadership and en- engagement in whatever form as an employee, as a middle manager, as a player, a teammate, is a transactional one. You know, you're expecting from them and they're expecting from you, but it's going to be an equal transaction. It's not going to be solely one that is more is expected than is given. And uh, that's how you build success. And it may not come immediately when you take over your leadership position because you have to build confidence in the culture and you have to cultivate the right people. You know, Jim Collins again said, get the right people on the bus. Um, but you know, by showing that you're attuned to these inner game or the psychological dimensions of a person's life, including their background, you know, how their background shaped them, and how they perform is as important as you know, honing their skills in terms of fitness and in terms of technique. Uh, but at the same time, it's doing so with the same high level of expectations and demand for discipline.
In our last conversation, you said character is revealed when no one's looking. In today's very public world, how do leaders actually build character, not just signal it?
Well, character is tough to build because we really it starts with who people are to begin with, and the hay, much of the hay is in the barn by the time that they're ever employed or being recruited by you. And so I hate to sound I'm being elitist, but you know, it, people that come from have difficult characters or traits that are not really conducive to you know the kind of team esprit de corps that you're building. It's tough to change in a limited period of time. And in college, when you have college athletes, you only have them for 4 years. It's even shorter now with NIL and with the transfer portal. So I think you have to be attuned to it and who you recruit. And who you recruit is not necessarily the highest ranked junior who's a you know real like thinks they're a star and that they're you know what doesn't stink. Um, so you're looking for someone that has this. Anson Dorrance, who was the coach of the women's soccer team at UNC, which is, of all their sports programs has been the most successful historically, um, you know, said that he looks for certain qualities. On one hand, he looks for team players, not solo you know, superstars, and he looks for individuals that can dominate, that they have this kind of hunger to dominate the field, to run the field. Um, and I think you referred to that before when we talked about being in the moment. You know, you look for players that are able to, they love to be in the moment. They handle the moment well, as opposed to have trepidation of being in the moment. Um, so, uh, you know, the thing is that you want to look for people that have already the qualities that you're trying to build, or at least don't have you know, really what I would call the much more deleterious psychological features. And then you build their character while they're in the program, which has to do with their commitment to a shared set of goals, values, um, and understanding of the leader, your interest in them as a person, not just as a player who's going to win and enhance your coaching reputational value and record.
Absolutely. I mean, at Husky men's tennis, we frame it just in terms of, what kind of leader do you want to be? And did your behavior on the court or maybe off the court, is that reflective of who you want to be as a leader? And then trying to, if there's any gap there, doing, saying, hey, what do we need to do? What can you do to fill the gap there? And sometimes it's just getting a little bit more focused and just doubling down on, um, that self-awareness, and understanding what it takes to achieve big goals. I think leaders can't be afraid to continue to challenge their team members to become better and better leaders, and have conversations around what that kind of growth looks like and what those steps need to
Well,
be.
one thing that I think can be useful, although it can you seem a little gimmicky, and you have to be comfortable being able to do it as a leader, is uh, doing things that are sort of off piste, so to speak. Like in skiing, you ski off piste. This is outside of the usual routine of coaching collegiate athletics. Um, so, for example, people go on these kind of field trips where you go on a field trip where you're outside of the usual environment and you're hanging out and getting to know people in a different way. Um, and in that sense, you get a better picture of how people act and what kind of individuals they are, and that gives you information as well as able to build the substance of the relationship by letting people expand in that way in which they relate to each other. The other thing is having exercises of sorts where you have a gathering, whether it's over dinner or whether it's uh, just sitting around a table and sharing things about yourself. You ask people to share something that you find to have been like the most fear frightening or harrowing that you've gone through, or share something that you have the most regrets about, or share something that you think was your greatest success, something. But and you do it too. And you're showing them that you're vulnerable at the same time that whenever your vulnerability or missteps were can be overcome, and you're getting people to allow you in a bit to who they are, which then should build trust and confidence, because it's not going to be held against them, or it's not going to be used in any way that can come back to hurt them. So you want to be sympathetic to these things. On the other hand, you don't want a team that's a losing team. And if you have a losing team, then that's not going to be the side that you necessarily need to emphasize. But it's really, these are all sort of, I would say, arrows in your quiver that one can use to try and build. When kids apply to college, college admissions offers get many more applications than they can places to accept. And they when they evaluate us on the GPA and on the board scores and extracurricular activities, they're trying to sculpt like a mosaic a freshman class or a class, and you're trying to sculpt a team. Now, the sine qua non of the team, sine qua non means, it's a medicine term, means the most important single feature is their athletic ability. But on the other hand, you have other qualities that are also important to complement the individual and that come together in the team. There's individuals that are just outspoken and gregarious. There's others that are more, reserved and quiet and introspective. I'll take one example of Columbia, which the men's tennis team is very good. Because it's a nerd school and because they didn't have the very good best facilities until recently, it was a hard school to recruit from. And the coach didn't necessarily get, the top ranked juniors, but he got kids that he was able to, over the 4-year period, develop to get their best, to get the best out of them. And, they he said to me one time when I asked him about the difficulty in recruiting, he said, when kids come in, they'll comment on the shabbiness of the facility or the fact that Columbia doesn't have a great reputation for athletics. They said, look, if you want to come to a country club and play tennis, well, that's fine. But if you want to come to a place where you get a great and you're going to really learn what it takes to play tennis and have an opportunity to do so, then you should come here. And his record speaks for itself.
Absolutely. Columbia's done a phenomenal job. I don't know Howie Endelman personally, but I have a lot of respect for what he's built at Columbia, on top of what our mutual friend Bit Goswami started there at Columbia. Yeah, they've done a tremendous job. Just to be respectful of both of our schedules, we have 2 to 3 quick questions before we sign off. Jeff, since our last conversation, what are you seeing more clearly now about leadership or mental health?
Well, first of all, the younger generation is different, is changing, and one has to be attuned to that. And as you get older, it's further and further away from how you grew up, or at least I grew up. Um, so you need to be aware of the fact that these kids, this isn't the same old Buick or Chevy that your grandfather drove. Um, and to sort of be aware of it doesn't mean that you change. It just means that you're aware of this. But I think in reality, the same fundamentals still apply. And there's a great quote. I forget who the source of it was. This is uh, when somebody says they don't know who they are. Say, well, the answer is be yourself because everyone else is taken. And so you have to figure out who. So you want to help somebody know, because the time that they're in college and are coming into their prime in terms of athletic performance is a tricky time of life. It's a time when they're going from their maturational stage is going from having been a increasingly less dependent but still dependent child or adolescent into an adult who is independent and mature, except maturity emotionally extends way beyond, the late teens, early 20s now. And so you have to be aware of the fact that they're going through this stage. Also, they're away from home, many for the first time. They're susceptible to a lot of the temptations that exist within the college environment, which, in addition to whatever academic and social pressures there are, it's exposure to recreational drugs, the exposure to different types of romantic entanglements, and so they're in a different environment. At the same time, at that age, kids think they're invulnerable. They think that they'll never get sick, they'll never be hurt, they can do what they want, they're less risk averse, but at the same time, the same kind of dangers await them. So you have to assume that you have to be more than just coach. You have to be kind of a surrogate parent, advisor, in building their character. But at the same time, you're their role model, and you want to exemplify them being the role model. So I think you want to be attuned to the fact that the culture is changing and the generations that are born into these. And by the way, change is occurring. The change that's occurred in the human race and human society since ancient times was at first arithmetic, then geometric, then exponential. It's logarithmic now, and it's occurring within generations. So this is something that is, I'm not sure what the actionable changes to do are, but it's just the awareness that this is the world that we're living in, and to be aware of that. And this is a good thing to do in terms of another exercise. I talked about the one of the dare exercise of tell me something about yourself and let your guard down. The other is how are people adjusting? What do people think about what's going on in the world? Take it outside of tennis and then bring it back to tennis. Is the time in the world when you see all the geopolitical stuff scary, when you see all the economic volatility scary, or are they just blithely blowing it off? Well, that's what happens. It's not our problem. Things will still be the same. Um, so I think to show that you're a real person, to bring it out there, it tells you something about them and it tells you something about you. But you have to be also comfortable doing it, and you have to. And even if you don't come to it naturally, you can develop that ability. You can develop that. That's that by one getting into those discussions, but also two just reading up or making yourself aware of the relevant information for that.
Absolutely, Jeff. I mean, since the outset of my career, I've had a private goal to be America's most caring coach. I mean, caring is so highly underrated, in sports, business, and in life. I mean, you have to give a shit. I mean, you have to care. Um, and you have to be completely honest with the people that are in front of you. Um, in order to build the trust that's necessary to accomplish big things. You're talking about vulnerability, and you're talking about the the essential skill that I believe that all leaders need today, which is the ability to empower your team members. And you talked about today's generation. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be inspired and empowered, and they want to create their own level of accountability and
But
ownership.
but 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 at the same time, you want them to go all out, to put themselves on the line, to like leave everything on the court. Um, but they're only going to do it if they believe in what they're doing. One of the best demonstrations of that uh, was um, Columbia had like a six-peat string going, and they were going for their seventh, and they were playing their last match, and that was going to determine whether they won the championship or not. And it was down to the last match, and this kid was playing, and he was down. He was down match point, several match points, and the other team was serving, and he saved, I would say, 4 or 5 match points with these just amazing, where he just defensively got the shot back, put himself, ran from side to side, dove for a ball, and he managed to hold off, win the game, and then win the match for the team. I mean, that wouldn't happen, I don't think, if somebody was playing for a coach that really expected everything from the teammate, but wasn't reciprocating with showing that they were a caring person. So just like you're going to go all out for them, they're going to go out for you. You want to go all out for them also.
100%. Okay, last two questions. Jeff, when you think of corporate athletes, what leadership traits do you envision?
Well, this is a question that I begin with in the course I teach to the medical students and the residents. And the answers that when I ask them the question, they never give me the right answer. They say leadership means intelligence, vision, discipline, hard work. No, it's character. It's character. And again, the John Wooden quote about how do you best judge of a man's character is to see what they do when no one's looking. And your subordinates, whether it's athletes or whether it's employees, need to know you're a stand-up person and what kind of person you are. After that, you need to have abilities to have a vision. You need to be able to articulate a game plan. You need to have certain organizational skills in terms of how to deploy. And it doesn't have to be. It's not a boilerplate cookie cutter. One size fits all, because you're not necessarily the best at all these things. So if you take first, character, meaning you're going to be honest, you're going to be have a set of values that are of mutual interest, not just self-serving, um, and that you're going to strive to do the right thing wherever possible. But then beyond that, you want discipline, meaning people are going to be focused on their job in a very serious and committed way. You want to have an ethic of hard work. Um, you would like to have the vision thing. Not everybody has the same degree of that. And you need to have the ability to articulate and express what your vision is and what your goals and what your values are. And to the extent that you uh, are self-aware and knowing that you aren't necessarily the most eloquent speaker, or you're more reserved and inhibited in being able to, or that you have a person with great vision, but you're not very organized. Um, uh, you try and cultivate that, but then you fill in whatever your limitations are with your subordinates, meaning you're going to have a middle management in most corporate environments, and so you want to surround yourself with people who are able to complement what you can recognize. And then the other thing is that there's a tendency for people to surround themselves with yes people, or with people that are not going to show them up by being smarter than them. That's clearly wrong. The best room to be in is the room that you're the least smart person in the room, and see that as a advantage, not as a disadvantage.
Jeff, if you had 60 seconds with the next generation of leaders, what should they prioritize?
I don't think so much the problem is that what the next generation of leaders prioritizes in terms of their development. I think the problem is how we identify leaders. We don't identify leaders well. Who becomes CEO of a company? Who becomes the top coaches, get the plum coaching jobs? Who becomes the heads of the department, the deans of the department, the provosts, and so forth? As I started out by saying, character, I think, is the most important factor. To what degree is character assessed in these in the search processes? Oh yeah, we're interested in who they are, but how do you do that? Best way is references, but there's people are loath to say bad things about people that have left their organization or they've only worked with in the past. So I think the real problem is, how do you identify a good leader? And in terms of what should leaders prioritize? Again, it's reflecting the issue that you want people who are similarly minded or are able to be cultivated in a way to be similar minded, meaning in the long run, being self-serving and being self-interested is not a winning proposition for playing the long game. It may work, it may work in the short term. And the problem with the fact that leaders are selected in the way that we select them gives younger people the wrong impression. They think that this is the way you get to the top, and it's not the way you get to the top. And if you look at the examples of great leaders, like again in the Collins book, Good to Great, where he cites, the level 5 leaders, they're people you've never heard of. The people you've heard of are not the top leaders. They were people who are more the grandstanders. And so, and this is the most important thing in terms of leaders. When you get into a position of leadership, how you got there was through your own success and prowess. Okay, whether it's a winning record on the court, whether it's profitability in business, whether it's discovery through research and academia, where there is kind of a self-aggrandizing motivation. But once you get to the leadership role, your success is not about you; it's about the organization and the people in the organization. And one, you have to realize that and be able to buy into it. And two, you have to make the people in the organization or on the team realize that it's about them and not about you. But at the same time, you're going to expect from them the highest standards because in the long run that's the best thing for them.
I think it was Jack Welch of GE fame who said, before you become a leader, success is all about yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. Jeff,
That's it.
I want to thank you for your time today. As usual, you're an amazing guest. Your insight is it's premier. It's the best of the best. I love doing this. Hopefully, we can do it again, and maybe we'll play some tennis one day. Well,
Sounds good. Definitely, you're on. I'll take you up on that.
all righty. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Good to see you again, Rene. Best
All
of
right.
luck. And
Thank
love the fact that you're doing this in addition to your coaching.